соседние какие там страны? А, с кем? Здесь в Москве, да? Основной инфо, знаете, он мой научный руководитель. Да нет, деньги правильно, они приходят.
Раз, два. Dear participants, I hope you are ready. So, can we start? Guys, please take your seats and let's start. Okay. So, I can see that we are ready. Come on, keep quiet, please. Okay. Okay, that's cool. That's cool. So, we're continuing our workshop. So, who will start? I think the group number one. Who is the speaker? So, please start. Thanks.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Timo Shihepo. I'll be the one representing Group 1. Our Group 1 consists of participants from Namibia, Cote d'Ivoire, Algeria, Egypt, Cameroon, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. And Nigeria, sorry, yes. We discussed the SDGs. First of all, we will be starting with, or what we have realized is that most of the problems or most of the issues in our different countries are similar to in other countries as well. How there is, if we can start, there is a lack of coverage as far as the 17 SDGs are concerned, mostly because the media in these African countries lack capacity to travel to different places where we really need to bring the issue of SDGs to the fore, mostly because the roads are bad, and also because the media doesn't have money. Most of the time, the media really depend on international organizations or donors, or when the minister or ministry is having an event somewhere. That's really the only time the media goes to these far places. Well, places that are near towns or capital cities, yes, the issues of SDG are covered, but the ones that are really far from towns, they are not covered. And also the areas, the remote areas, there are no media houses. Journalists can't access that. So it's an issue that is really common in many of the countries that are under review. Um, just moving forward, um, we also discussed that sometimes no independence and flexibility of the media to cover these SDG goals. As I've said before, we depend on international organizations. But there are also some good things. For example, in Zimbabwe, the live broadcast of an election dispute between the ruling party and the opposition party, that is really good in a way that it promotes the peace and sustainability in several countries. It has happened in Zimbabwe, it has happened in Namibia as well, and it's also happening in other countries. Um, in Cote d'Ivoire, they award journalists who promote SDG goals. We found really that exciting, because if journalists are being awarded to promote SDGs, it means that a lot of SDGs or issues concerning SDGs will be really covered. If that can be replicated in many countries, I think it will be really good for Africa. In Egypt, there is now a human rights organization, a human rights magazine covering issues on human rights. That's another positive issue that came out from this. And as much as it's being done, sometimes most of these things are funded by, I have to emphasize on this, it's done by international organizations. We lack local donors, local funders. Another issue that needs to be discussed, it's the covering of the work that is done by the civil society as far as the SDGs are concerned. If the media can cover so much of what the civil society is doing, then we can bring to the fore the issue of SDGs. How can the media effectively cover SDGs then? Well, advocacy. We highlighted the issue of, to say, media should play advocacy in terms of highlighting issues such as, for example, inflation, food unaffordability, and also media must then bring issues or highlight policies, international policies from developed countries that help advocate for issues of inflation to end poverty, issues to better our education system. That this can be done without necessarily having to commit so much money. All we have to do as media is do research. Then you bring that issue to the fore so that the governments can take notice. Another issue, how can the media effectively cover SDGs? Partnerships. That's really important, to have partners that can really help the media cover SDGs. I think if we put it into context, that's the reason why we are here at this forum. Right now, we are here. We are discussing possible ways how to cooperate between the Russian media and African media. How can we cooperate to then maybe talk about peace and stability? That's why one of the reasons why we are here. That is partnership. There is also another issue of called African Youth Connect. I don't know if many of you guys know this. It's a united, it's an African homegrown solution positioned to provide the relevant solutions for the global South to support the implementation of South initiatives to empower the youth. And it's aligned with the African Youth Charter and SDGs. It's an issue, it's an initiative by the United Nations that really brings the issue of the youth in several countries. And then it's hosted, it's first discussed at several countries. Then they will have a big event. I think last year was held in Kigali, if I'm not mistaken. And if the media can cover more on that African Youth Connect, it will speak to the SGD of the youth, especially, and also gender. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your profound speech. So we have covered some issues about the lack of capacity to travel to different places to cover the events, the cases with the city center journalism and the journalistic effects of covering SDGs in different African countries. And we have covered the issues of some youth initiatives. So, Team 2, do you have any questions to the presenter? You have to.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm Dawood Adebayo. So, Mr. Timotheus, I would like to ask you, what can you say about the understanding of journalists, based on your analysis of the report that you have, about the understanding of journalists in the countries that are represented in your group of SDG, and how that reflects in the reportage of SDG that you guys worked on?
Thank you very much. Sometimes journalists in Africa, especially the ones that I've spoken to anyway, they will be covering SDG issues, but they don't necessarily know that they are covering SDG issues. I think there's a lack of information or lack of training, maybe either from the United Nations part or our governments, to really educate or have events or conferences for journalists to say these are SDGs and this is how we can enhance and partner together so that we can bring them to the fore.
Thank you very much.
So my question is, I think most of the journalists in Africa, it looks like they are mostly doing things to like entertain or maybe to impress the government. So they are even forgetting to work closely with youth-led organizations and initiatives, which I think youth-led organization and initiatives are the ones mostly covering concerning SDG issues because they are more of empowerment in initiatives. So how do you think, what do you think the media people should do when it comes to work closely to the initiatives and the youth-led organizations?
Well, thank you very much for that question. One reality we talked about in our group is that most of the media houses we talk about, they lack the flexibility, talking about the ownership. Just like we say, he who plays the piper dictates the tone. So media ownership is one very key thing that is affecting coverage of sustainability goals in Africa. Now, we think in our own way that many media houses in Africa can begin to work closely with these NGOs, which they do currently. Now, you see, most of these NGOs may not be able to afford to pay journalists to report their news, but it can be part of the CSR of the journalists to cover this and report this. You know, media ownership and then news commercialization has been a very major issue in Africa. So if we go by the idea of commercializing, we might not achieve that. But we talked about it in our group that it should be part of the CSR of all media houses to work closely with all of these civil societies, with these NGOs, and then report for them either at cheaper rates or more or less for free. So that's the solution we propose in our team.
What do you think? What do you say concerning the bribe issue? Because that's another problem. The media can't work with organizations, especially the startups, and the fact that they may have good contents for them, but still they will put money first. So they even forget the importance of SDGs. And they think like we cannot promote SDGs unless there is money. And they believe where the SDGs are coming from, maybe the United Nations, they believe the United Nations has money. So if the United Nations is not providing money for the journalists, then they will not cover it. So do you think it's our problem as journalists, or it's just people's mindset, or do you think it's true that we deserve to have money so that we can cover SDGs?
There is a saying that says journalists are overworked and underpaid. You can't necessarily be reporting or doing stories and your stomach is on empty. All right. So now to answer your question, we need transparency. If an institution is saying we are going to fund SDGs, it should be transparent for everybody to see. It should be online, and it should not be between, say, the United Nations and just a certain media organization. We would like the United Nations, if it's channeling money to fund the coverage of SDGs, the money goes through a certain transparency process, maybe to a certain organization that is governed, a certain an organization that governs the media in a certain country, to say we have these millions and we would like this amount to be given to maybe 10 media houses in the country. And this is what we, as the UN, this is what we need to be covered, SDGs, and all the information can be accessed online. That way, it will avoid the issue of bribery, because if it's done between just one media house and a certain organization, then the issue of bribery can come to the fore.
Yeah, if you want, you can.
Yes. So, sir, as you know, right now in Russia, there's Russia-Africa Media Forum going on, and there are some of the journalists who are invited there. They're there. But do you think the journalists that are there, are they enough? Or we need more journalists to go to such forums? Because I think also the issue comes is journalists themselves, it's kind of, they don't understand what SDGs are and the importance of SDGs. That's why they don't find the importance of covering. So what do you say to the Russian people when it comes to creating more forums for journalists to get more education and learn?
Well, it's certainly not enough. We have so many media houses in Africa, and certainly it's not enough. I think it's imperative that Russia, which is so has a good relationship with Africa, well, at international levels anyway, but in terms of media relations, that is quite lacking, you know. If you ask any government in Africa, most of them will tell that we have good relationships with Russia. The foreign minister, I think most government officials know him very well, because of he's always traveling, he's always having relations. But when it comes to the media, Africa does not have a relationship with the Russian media. I think there is Russia Today there in Africa, but it's not necessarily well known or common as compared to the Western countries. And if I might just divest a little bit, I also encourage maybe the Russian government or Russian media houses to help or ask media houses from Africa to go and cover the military operation that is happening currently on the side of Russia. Because what the Western world is doing, they take their journalists on the Ukraine side, and we only see information on the other side of Ukraine, but we don't see information on this side of Russia. But that's just what I'm my thinking, and I don't think it's enough as a journalist to be here.
Hello. Yeah. Najmapo, I just want to go back on the issue highlighted of bribery in journalism. I think that's a very topical issue in journalism. Bribery goes along with corruption at the same time. And corruption is a social disease that journalists themselves have to fight. It's not only corruption within politicians, as journalists would always want to put it across to say, this politician is corrupt, he got money from this organization and he didn't use it for this and this. Journalists also can be bribed, not to publish a story, not to tell a story the way it is supposed. So I think it goes back to the individual person who is reporting, your ethics as an individual, and knowing what you are representing as an individual, that you want to fight poverty, you want to fight corruption, you want to end hunger. That means you, as a journalist, you have to be straightforward, because I might come with money and say, I don't want you to publish this story because I'm trying to cover up for something, maybe the COVID-19 funds or some other money that was put out there. So I believe it goes back to training of journalists and the individual person himself to know what ethical journalism is.
Now, I just want to add just to the last part where she was asking that, do we have enough representation of Africans here in this forum to actually give a wide coverage to the issue of SDG in Africa? So I just want to mention that, well, this may not be enough actually, but we should also look into how can we here talk about establishing a very strong collaboration with the media houses in Russia, whereby Russia can train journalists from Africa. It might not necessarily be coming to Africa. It could be a virtual training whereby Russia can train African journalists on how to go exactly in reporting and then covering SDG issues. This could be very specific. There are many issues that the media covers, but we can be particular about how do we handle the issue of SDG as it affects Africa. As I was saying in our group, the themes in SDG affects no other continent as it affects Africa. Africa feels the pain the more. So we need more cover, we need more sensitization about these goals. So this is a way where Russia can come in. How can we partner, have a very strong partnership with media outlets in Africa? Let me give an instance. Just like he said, the CNN, the BBC, they penetrate Africa with our local language. They speak Swahili, they speak Hausa, they speak Yoruba, they speak Igbo, they speak many indigenous languages in Africa. And then they resonate their message to us in Africa very well. Now, apart from, I think, Swahili, that I think Sputnik News is doing in Africa, and then Arabic, that is covering the northern part of Africa. Now, what efforts can we get from the media houses in Russia to speak to Africans in their local language? Many of these issues we are talking about might not affect the elites in Africa, but those who might need to be communicated to in their own local and indigenous language. Thank you.
Excuse me, can I ask some question, please? My name is Mohammed Al Zayani. I will try in English, but in Russian better. I'm from Libya, and right now I am president of Union Arab and Rudan. Question for you, sir. Do you have any idea in my country, Libya, for the journalists? Because our channels and the media in Libya is all the thing. It's a nationality media. We don't have any other media in our country. Do you have any idea to help us in this problem, please?
Yo, you were
Excuse
saying
me,
in
have
Libya.
any project, have any,
Yeah.
because we don't see any African media in our country. Libya is African country, 100%. Why is that? I don't know. Yes, thank you so much.
All right. Hopefully, I got the question right. How can we help you get information from Libya to Africa? Is that correct? Yeah. I'm gonna be frank and honest. When it comes to Libya, I think we have let you down as an African country. And we have let the West win. And unfortunately, right now, due to lack of resources, mostly from the media houses around Africa, it's so difficult. But all is not lost. If you have, do you guys have a union, a media union in your country? You have?
Yes, actually we have, yeah.
Is it part of the International Federation of Journalists? I think that is really one way that we can communicate. Never mind the language barrier, but through the media unions, I think that way we can communicate. We can help get stories from Libya that will then be able to have it published in Africa. Because right now in Libya, we still rely on the Western media to tell us what's really happening there. Like as if they are not the one who destroyed the country. Yet we are still being fed information via those Western media. So we we can exchange contact if you'd like. Then we can discuss further.
Thank you for answers, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much, group number 1, group number 2, for your presentation. And now we are ready for the presentation of group number 2. Who will be the speaker? Wonderful. You can start.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having us. Group number 2 is composed of 10 members from 8 different countries, made up of Armenia, South Africa, Tanzania, Egypt, Cote d'Ivoire, Rwanda, Cameroon, and Nigeria. But before I go to our presentation, let me just chip in something with regards to the last question from the Libyan gentleman.
Thank you, sir.
I think what's really the issue here is that we lack a truly Pan-African media. And if you can't get something like that, it will be difficult to still deal with the issue there. If we have inter-journalist union relationship, and just journalists in Nigeria, journalists in Zambia, and other places are just reporting in their local newspapers. And even the people in Nigeria and Tanzania, are they really concerned about Libyans? If they can't really see what's going on there on TV, like what they can see on BBC or Al Jazeera, would they really be concerned the way they are supposed to be? How many Nigerians read newspaper nowadays? So we really need to consider that aspect. So if we have a way of coming together, or if there is a way of upgrading the ones that are already close to being continental in their coverage of events in Africa without relying on external sources. There is a channel in South Africa that is kind of close to being continental. I can't remember, maybe South African Broadcasting Corporation or so. I'm not very sure. But I know the channels, the big channels in Nigeria, they don't have the capacity to cover the continent. And I don't know of any other big TV media in Africa that can really do or replace the narratives that is being pushed by the likes of BBC, CNN, VOA, or Al Jazeera in that regard. So if, along with what Mr. Timothy has recommended, I would suggest that work should begin earnestly. There can be a Russian-African cooperation in that regard as well. How we can have a truly Pan-African media that has the strength to actually cover the whole continent and bring the actual African narrative to the fore. So that's what we need. Not just the case of Libya. So many good things happen in Africa, but these global media only report the bad things. They remember us when there are disasters. When Africans are making moves that can actually change things, no, it's the local media that are doing that. They are not there then. They are hardly there. They are rarely there. So if we don't have people who are actually Africans and are ready, they are interested in the African narrative, and they have the capacity to actually do the job, it will be difficult. So we need to actually get that. So now, sorry that I digressed, please. So back to the main business, which is the reportage of SDGs in Africa. So from the countries that we have in our group, or before I go to that, let me just note that the presentation will be in this format. We'll look at the patterns of the reportage. Then we'll consider the nature or dimension of these reports. Then we'll look at the challenges, then there are recommendations. So the patterns now, what are the patterns? What do we have? So from countries like Tanzania, Nigeria, Cote d'Ivoire, and all, we realize that SDGs like the gender equality, the quality education, report on health, environment, and all were covered. They are covered in these different countries. In Rwanda, there are the issues of education is covered. Issues of gender equalities is covered in Nigeria. But what's the nature? When do they cover it? How do they cover it? That's where the nature now comes in. What is the quality of the reportage? So we realize that the quality is very poor. is not adequate. They only cover it from the perspective of the donor agency saying whatever they want to say about the SDGs that they are funding, or the UN giving the report of how a particular country is performing in one regard or the other. The journalists are not really going to the grassroots to see how this SDG performance or whatever is actually playing out in the real sense. So we have situations in Nigeria where Nigerian reporters only focus on gender equality issues during election. They only remember it mostly and report about it during elections when they started looking at the candidate and say, oh, it's only one woman that is trying to be vying for the presidency, only a woman among the ministerial candidates, only one woman among the gubernatorial candidates. That's when they remember issues of the gender equality in the SDGs. So, or when there are issues of gender-related issues in the North, that's when they remember it and now consider it. So there are issues, just like the speaker of the group one said, that a lot of journalists even report things that are related to the SDGs, but they don't connect it to the SDGs. And this is really creating problem of actually channeling some of these narratives so that we will know where we are going. We will know where we are. So it's a big problem. We also have, so from the nature of the report, we realize that a lot of journalists lack understanding of the SDG. And apart from the understanding, they lack interest in it. Because when you lack understanding of something, but you are interested in it, you will surely look for information about it and you will get what you need to know about it, then improve on yourself about that particular thing. But the lack of interest is also there. We will discuss about what might be the possible causes of this lack of interest later when we get to the challenges. So this lack of interest and is also coupled with this tendency to avoid controversy. Africans, we don't really like to be in controversial situation. Anything that can bring controversy, if you can control the situation, people like to avoid it. So a lot of journalists, they just want to give reports that won't lead to problem for them, particularly if they feel that someone in the government, someone in power will be offended by that kind of report. So they run away, they shy away from those kind of reports. It's affecting the SDG reportage. So let's look at the challenges. Let's take a look at the challenges. From the aspect of the challenges, we have a lack of adequate media coverage. Just like we have pointed out, there is lack of infrastructure and resources. Just like the members of the group one pointed out, that there are bad roads. Yeah, but at the same time, there is lack of funding. The lack of funding from the media house. The media houses as well are not interested in reporting these SDGs. So the issues of the media ownership comes in. The media ownership influence the editorial direction of their media houses, even if it might not be directly. They have influence on the editorial policy of the media houses. So most of these media houses are not interested. Why? One of the reasons we might be able to point out is the fact that most of the media houses in Africa are owned by politicians. These are the people in power. These are the people that the SDG reports will actually serve as a kind of scorecard for. It's like you scoring them that you guys, this is how you have performed so far. So they are not interested in it because they know they are not doing well. So they won't fund it. If a reporter that a media house in Abuja in Nigeria, for instance, needs to go to a place that is like 400 kilometers to Abuja to report something related to the SDG, his media house will not be interested in it, particularly if it belongs to a politician, except if it will affect the opposition. Because that one, now they know it will tarnish the image of those ones will be painted in bad lights. Yeah, they will be ready. But if it is something that will affect them, they are not. So this media ownership pattern in Africa is also a very big challenge. Though we have the issue of the corruption. Yeah, Nigeria, we have tried to fight that Leviathan, or should I call it a monster, whichever word we try to call it, but I don't know how to describe where we find ourselves. We fought it superficially for 8 years, but it seems it's getting stronger by the day. Maybe we are not really fighting. We are just rubbing whatever on it to make it feel better rather than fighting it in the real sense. We are only lying to ourselves because it's a thing that cut across sector, not just in the government, but even among the people. So when the people are not ready to change, but we are expecting the government to just create some magic. So this same situation runs deep within the media industry. A lot of journalists just that have tried to make the group one, the group one members have pointed out, a lot of journalists are actually just interested in the money they can make for whatever report. I work as a freelance journalist and I've done a lot of free work for NGOs that work on water and sanitation, the SDG 6. So a lot of journalists are not interested in this. We will go to remote villages, villages where people don't even have access to electricity. There is no network. There's nothing. They have, it's just like the government does not exist there. So we have these NGO Spring that goes to these communities to do water projects. So I follow them, and before the project, we will report about the situation of things. Then after the project. So a lot of journalists are not interested in doing things like that. There's no money there. So just like the group one members have pointed out, there is a need for these socially responsible journalism to be amplified and to be made clear to the journalists in Africa, so that more of those kind of journalism will be done. Humanitarian journalism. You don't, if you are after money, your work will not really matter to the people. So now, then the aspect of corruption again is because of the political landscape in the country. Most of it is from the political dimension. A lot of politicians are there to just pump money to journalists that are ready to spin the information in the society for them. And a lot of journalists are also just ready to just get that the easy way. They will just want to follow one politician and be the mouthpiece of that politician and make money. So that's easy way has kind of make it difficult to go for things that will actually make impact on the society, and there's no really much gain in it at the end of the day, financially, I mean. So these are the challenges that we have identified. So we have also now identified, we have come up with recommendations to the case or the situation of things when it comes to reporting SDGs in Africa. Journalists need to see things for themselves. They need to go to the grassroots. It's not just about UN saying so is the level of so is the performance in so country. That report, how does it translate? How does it reflect on the life of the people in the actual sense? What is the actual situation of things, apart from the report of the UN or whichever donor body or whoever is making the report? We need to know, journalists, we need to go beyond mere someone stating something to us. We need to investigate, verify, fact check. So this is very, very important. An example of this is that in February 9 this year, 2023, the UN says that Nigeria is lagging behind in terms of implementing the SDG. But to my surprise, 6 days ago, the same UN is being quoted by Nigerian media that Nigeria now ranks high in SDG performance. How did that happen? In February this year, Nigeria was lagging behind. Then 6 days ago, Nigeria is now ranked high. So there is a contradiction. I don't know how Nigeria can just move from lagging behind to being ranked high. It's not just performing better, but being ranked high. There is a disparity in the report. And there are cases like that from other African countries as well. So now, another recommendation is the establishment of thematic media. This is a case that we have particularly from Cameroon. Cameroon media are doing fantastically well in this regard. They have the example of the Cameroon radio television, the radio environment. Did I pronounce it well? Then there is the Ecosante. Is that right? So these media houses do thematic thematic media. They focus on just one theme, and this theme can actually relate to certain aspects of the SDG. Like the Ecosante focus on health, and the radio environment focus on the environment issues. So we need more of these kind of thematic or theme-based media in Africa. And in Nigeria, we have an example of the Human Rights TV. There is Human Rights TV and radio that are doing fantastically well in that regard. So we need this theme-based media, more of it, that covers, if not all, but most of the SDG goals, that will report just based on the SDGs. They don't concern themselves with any other thing. They will be funded. I'll propose that Russia should look into how they can help African media or even help youth-led organizations to create these platform that can be focused on these SDG goals. Then we have we are recommending an exchange program, Russia and African exchange program, where journalists in Africa can be brought, you bring them to Russia to train them in how to use modern facilities, how to actually cover the SDGs, because we have in the morning we had presentation about how the Russian media is actually doing in that regard. So we need to benefit from that. A lot of journalists in Africa need to benefit from that. And at the same time, it will be better to also take journalists from Russia who have experience in covering SDGs to Africa so that they can put things in perspective. They do it the right way. You bring African journalists to Russia, then you take Russian journalists to Africa, to these remote places, funded, so that they will be able to actually put things in the right way. So this is how you do these things. They will do it the way the Africans are supposed to do it, just to set the example in the African continent. Then we have the need that we are also recommending that the people needs to be sensitized. So there is a need for seminars, workshop for the people, not the journalists now. We will talk about the journalist aspect. Even the people, a lot of people have no idea about what SDG is about. So they don't really care if Nigeria or Cameroon or Cote d'Ivoire ranks low or high or middle. They don't care. They don't know what it means. And the journalists that don't understand it as well, they just report it directly from what the UN is giving them. So it's useless to the people when you don't do interpretive reporting to actually analyze and contextualize and say, this is what this means for you. And the people that do not understand it as well, just take it like that, and it's just useless at the end of the day. So also, we are recommending that journalists need to be educated in how to cover the SDGs. And lastly, there is a need for partnership among journalists in Africa with youth-led organizations. In Tanzania, for instance, they have lots of youth-led organizations that are focused on different goals of the SDG. So journalists need to be ready to partner. Journalists and media organizations need to partner more with these organizations. Thank you very much. Yes.
Thank you very much for such an impressive speech. And now questions from Group 1.
Oh, thank you very much to the team and then to Babatunde for the presentation. It's detailed. I will first of all talk about the ranking of the SDG before I go to my question. You see, the ranking of the SDG has its own metrics, so that they reported Nigeria to be low on the ranking a few days back, and then being high on the ranking a few days after could not be contradictory. You see, the data they use, they collect it quantitatively over a time. So the one you see could have been a data to a particular time, and the one you are seeing to a particular time. So what I'm trying to propose is that as we, the journalists, we should focus more on qualitative sensitization, not about what we put out. Now, you said something that the beginning of your presentation that how many Africans read newspapers? Now, how many activities are we putting together as journalists to convey information on SDGs to the locals in the indigenous language? That is the only way we can ingrain or imprint something about SDG into the people. That starts with us. Now, my question now is, what effort does your team think Africans as a whole, to start with, before we call for collaboration outside, can put together to look into how we can take this information to the local people in the language that resonates with them, in the language or in the way that they see it as a very crucial issue. Let me give an instance. I was working on climate change some years back, and I realized that even farmers who are directly affected by flooding, by many things, by climate variation and other stuffs, do not even know more about the strategies that have been in existence long before we talk about the issue of climate change. They know them, but they don't know, okay, when the media talk about this in the media language, they don't even know what it is. But these things exist. So how do you think, what suggestion will your team bring up on how journalists in Africa can actually go to the roots with the indigenous language? Nigeria has various languages, more just like many other African countries. So what efforts does your team suggest?
Thank you very much. Let me start by making a clarification. I'm not saying the ranking is wrong. I'm only saying just dishing out ranking to the people from what the UN is saying is useless when the people don't know what it translates to, what it means for them. And again, if we don't know the metrics, and we are able to check whether those things that they have used to actually measure to determine the ranking are there in the real sense, it's a problem. So it's the job of journalists to go beyond just stating that UN ranks Nigeria this and that, to tell us, okay, this ranking means this is the impact, this is the consequence of such ranking. And this is actually the situation of things for us to have so ranking. Do you understand what I'm saying now? Now, to the main question, which is what should Africans on our own end, what are we supposed to put in place? I think it starts with the interest, just like I mentioned, and the aspect of the nature. When the journalists themselves are interested in reporting SDGs, then they will look for how to get the people interested in the SDG. Now, to do that, just like I said about Tanzania, and in Nigeria, I know there are lots of SDG-based NGOs led by youth, some not led by youth. The media needs to collaborate with them, and they will be the ones to now know how to get the right information about this SDG to the people. So if the media, the journalists, NUJ for instance, if NUJ members sensitize themselves so that they are all interested in the SDG, the next thing for them to do is to create the interest in the SDG so that when the time they start reporting it at advanced level, people will also have the need for the information that will be given out at that time. So the journalists themselves needs to have the interest first. Then it goes from the journalists to the people. The journalists and the people that knows about it now, we are mostly the leaders, the youth leaders, or the people that head some of these NGOs in Africa can collaborate together to ensure that the people at the grassroots are sensitized. Now, you mentioned the aspect of the local language. Local language is very important. Very important. That's where the radios come in. In Africa, there are lots of programs in local radios about HIV and AIDS. Even they go to the extent that they create radio dramas. Some of these are sponsored by USAID. We can have things like that. You just need to create things are the right media. Use radio. Radios is the media that penetrates into the grassroots area in Africa. Particularly, I'm sure about Nigeria. I might not be sure about other countries, but I'm very sure about Nigeria. When you want to get to the grassroots, you use radio, because most of the local radios, we use the local language. So if journalists can collaborate among themselves, they can surely get the message to the people at the grassroots through the local radios. Thank you.
Yeah, I also just wanted to add something. Just how my partner said, where we should start it to educate ourselves first, but also after educating ourselves, things that we should consider as journalists, I think there are two things. First, we should also consider creating, trying to create relatable contents with what is going on in our countries, because as my partner said, that we are upfront reporting things concerning other countries more, without but not reporting things concerning our country. When we hear maybe Kenya is going through something, we are upfront to report something in Kenya. If Russia is going through something, we will talk and discuss about Russia the whole week, while probably Russia is even better than us, even if it seems like they're going through something, but maybe in our country, there are some things that are going on in local areas, in villages, and we don't even know, because we just don't want to go there at their local areas. But also something else is language. Language is very important. I think we should also do our very best to use a very understanding and comfortable language for our people, because for example, I work with East Africa TV, and I'm also a menstrual hygiene ambassador in my office. So we have this campaign known as Namthamini Nasimama Naye. That's Swahili, but in English, it's I value her, I stand with her. Our aim is to just provide sanitary towels for young girls in Tanzania, in urban areas who do not have access to them. So when we go there, and we just go for sanitary pads, but when we go there, we find so many sustainable development goals are not covered, and those people can't even afford that peaceful living and the freedom that they deserve, and the rights that they deserve. And then when you ask them, they're like, oh, we're used to it. It's normal. This has been our lives for more than 10 years. And then when we get there, they're like, but you journalists, when you come here, you just give us things and go, but you don't ask us, you don't discuss it with us, like which are the possible ways that can help us. You've already judged us that we are village people, and you just conclude, and you don't want to like help us improve or develop. So I think when you tell them, don't you watch TV, we have contents for you, but they will be like, you have contents, but your contents are more of international affairs or just other countries, but we don't hear you speaking about our regions, our problems, our issues, the possible solutions. So I think language is very, very important, because somehow journalists, being on the game for 5 years now, I've just realized that it's like we are doing some other things for trend, but we are really not doing things to bring productive solutions. So I think language is very, very, very important, and we should also remember, no research, no right to speak. Yeah.
Yeah, you can.
Now, I just want to make a
I'll be on this.
propose a recommendation on this floor, because is that okay? Yeah, because it's bringing media and then education together. Now we've talked about journalists being interested in SDG itself. Now, can we find a way of incorporating SDG into the school curriculum, whereby journalists will begin to learn right from school? This can be a partnership between schools, for instance, RUDEN, and then Department of Media and Communication in some states or in some countries. Okay, let's bring this into your curriculum. Let's have some of our experts to train you. For instance, in Nigeria, I had a master's. One of my courses is development communication. In Russia, I'm doing a course, I'm doing a program, population and development. So I'm looking at the way it connects. Africa needs to know more about what do we need about development. Many of the developmental issues we talk about in class are peculiar to us in Africa. Why are we having that? Because in school, we are not even talking about this. So we can find a way of finding how schools here in Russia can partner with, particularly the Department of Media and Communication, can partner with schools in Africa to bring this thing into the curriculum. Let the lecturers, so that people can begin to pick interest. A student that is studying medicine will have a general course for the first 2 years, then they begin to specialize. So journalists can begin to specialize in SDG right from school, and they pick very strong interest in that, and then they begin to practice that after school.
Just a moment, please. I've managed to listen to a couple of recommendations and issues discussed among you. I shouldn't, but I should, because I'm also in the field. One is that while it is very important to discuss challenges like we talked about yesterday, it's important to talk about solution. We're talking about these solutions, which I'm very glad that it's been discussed among ourselves, the African practitioners. So while it's also may be good and important for Rodin, for example, and any other external institutions to come in, the first act should come within. Individual, you guys are here. We have about 15 of you that come officially from Nigeria, from Africa, and we have many of you that are studying here, and you're also studying. You're in the field of journalism. Some of you are practitioners. Some of you are academics. Why don't you start forming something from here? Create a network. Start creating something. You can have a network from here. You can decide to say, okay, in Tanzania, we want to do this. In Nigeria, we want to do this. In South Africa, we want to. How many regions of the West and the African do we have? So create something, make it an act. Then from there, you can even write a proposal to the university. Then we come in and make it work. So that's just my suggestion to you.
Yeah, just to add on as well, I think the media in Africa has been playing a big role in polarizing, people in Africa for a very long time. Daud Adebayo, what can be done to depolarize the media in Africa? You see, the media is either aligned to the military, the ruling party, or the opposition, and this causes conflict in most areas as it polarizes even the people in Africa. For example, when African countries are going to elections, you have this media part is talking bad things about the opposite people, and this one is talking about the opposite people. What do you think should be done to have that independent media which doesn't, take sides in issues that have to do with politics in particular?
Okay, thank you very much, Mambo. When it comes to polarization of the press or journalism in Africa, it's because of the relationship or the connection of press or journalism in Africa and politics. Politicians, just like we have, the group one members pointed it out, I also emphasized it as because we as a group are also were able to identify it as part of the challenges. The media ownership in Africa, the pattern that we have now is a problem when majority of the media houses belongs to politicians. And politicians are always after their interests. So if you, for instance, it's just that there is no time, I would have given you the pattern of media polarization that we have in Nigeria, right from the first polarization. In 1923 thereabouts. You understand? Right from that time, we are still having the same issue today because of politicians. The first polarization happened as a result of politicians. The second one, the third one, to the fourth one. is as a result of politicians or politics. So we need to detach the media from politics. And since we need a liberal media space, we can't stop politicians from owning media houses. Journalists or the press, organizations of the press, are the ones that need to come up with means of reducing the impact of the ownership on the way the media operates. You understand? We need to look for mechanisms that can reduce it, ways of kind of protecting the integrity of the profession. So if we can come up with those mechanisms, it will be difficult because they are these politicians or businessmen that will later become politicians are the ones that have the money to establish the media. So the people that work there, who will be the ones that are responsible to the people at the end of the day, are the ones that will need to come up with ways of actually doing it. In reality, it is difficult because it is he who pays the piper that dictates the tune. But I don't know, maybe that's just like Dr. Mustafa has mentioned. These are things that need special deliberations, extra thinking, deep thinking that we need to really consider ways that things that mechanism we can put in place that journalists can fall back to and can protect them against this kind of media ownership influence in their work. Because journalists are also people. They have families to take care of. If they are saying they are on the side of the people and they lose their job, there is also consequence that will come from that. So is it that there are organizations that are there to protect journalists in times of these kind of issues, or we create mechanism that journalists and media ownership have to sign? I don't know. But something has to be in place that we limit the extent to which owners can really influence the content of the media. And that's the only way that's one of the ways I can think of now that we can reduce the polarization in the African media space.
Okay.
Please, can I ask a question?
I think. So we got one more question, and that's it. I think we're supposed to close. So.
Okay. Thank you for the audience. This is Mazi Ndikom. Actually, my question is from this wonderful topic that I've been going on today on media, because media is just like our eyes and also the air we breathe in every society. But in Africa, this is lacking. My question is the death rate in the whole of Africa. Why is our journalists are not reporting the level and the magnitude of the killings in all part of African countries? For example, in April 23rd this year, there was a lot of people that died out of starvation in Kenya, in the city of Malindi. The incident happened in the church, but during the report, they reported that it was cultist. But everybody know that it is a pastor of the church that gave the instruction for the members to starve, even little children. The people that died there are more than 150. So why the journalists in Africa are not digging deep, like the moderator when he was speaking concerning the forensic evidence, going to the roots of the problem to investigate the cause. So why are we lacking such in Africa, especially when it comes to the killings? I'm not talking only in Kenya, in the Republic of this in Congo, in Cameroon, that is even in Nigeria. All the people that are being killed, even during the NSAS protest, even till now, nothing has been done. Even the bodies of the people that were killed during the last NSA protest are still in the mortuary today. So why? My question is, why our journalists are not digging deep when it comes to the life of Africans when they are massacred? Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. I'm Scovia Mutesi from Rwanda. Your question, I think it's not true because now you know Kenya, you killing people because journalists you report. I'm Scovia. Me, I'm manager director, one media house of Rwanda, founder. But any journalist, any media house, money is from government, but the government don't support. It's a don't have money. Me now, I'm a survivor because I'm not a friend in the government in Rwanda, but I'm a friend of people. But support from NGOs and views YouTube. But why can you speak at, don't journalists Africa speak at another example, but I'm not speaking English very well, but today I'm trying because this question. Me, for example, me, I'm going to Republic of Congo in war because the Congo now is fighting in the M23. Me, I'm live fighting, but I'm reporting. Don't saying, don't media Africa, don't reporting in a true story because, but don't have many journalists and many money the same Al Jazeera, BBC and Africa 24, TV5, but I can try every day. Thank you, sir.
Is it okay if I can make like a little submission to the whole thing we've said? And also, I would also answer your question, but towards the end, through another perspective. Okay, so my name is Kingsley, and an MA student at IS School of Economics. I'm also a BJ for one of the media house in Russia. Okay, so it's okay. BJ is broadcast journalist, actually. So it's okay to blame journalists. It's okay to blame, but I think it all boils down to the government, right? And I'm going to explain why. Once we start looking at this from the global perspective, we understand why we have to take major of the blame to the government, because this is a game. Like I used to say, on the international stage, it's a game. Now, how is it a game? It's a game of information. It's a game of perception, right? If I want, you cannot tell who is good between two good people. You can only tell who is good if I make the other person bad. And that is how this game is being played. And that is why you see that America invests so much in media, in information. And they make all of these platforms free for people to use because they are trying to, every country should have an agenda, every country. And this starts from the government. I'm going to give an example. I was speaking to one of my editors, we're just having a discussion, and because right now it's Russia. If you understand the history of Russia, you understand that as powerful and mighty Russia is, it's never colonized anybody. Never. Because this is the sources of Russia's conduct. And it is not a big deal, but right now they are opening up because of Russia's survival on the international stage. I think the Russians can actually agree with me. Russia initially never had plans for international gains or nothing. The only thing they are concerned about is protecting their territory and what belongs to them historically. They don't even care about, influencing other people. But because of its existence in the EU, in the global stage, now it has opened up to start, doing like the other superpowers or potential superpowers in the upcoming global order do. Now, this is it. He said something. He said, the name of this media house, they operate in US and, in all of these places. And all of a sudden, because of the sanctions, their license were revoked. And now a directive came from above that we have to focus on Africa, Middle East. Now the directive is changing. And that is why now they're going to spend a lot of investment in this aspect. I'm going somewhere. If you don't understand that as a country, you're playing a game on the global stage, then you've lost. I can tell categorically that most African countries, governments do not really see how important media of their country is to put themselves on the table on the global stage, because I think the only thing they use it for is national politics. Aside that, international politics, they don't use it like that. And a case happened, I think last week, about some shooting in South Korea. Just one man took a gun and was shooting. And every media house was reporting this. Why? Because South Korea has been considered a very peaceful country for years. So for you to see somebody shoot, and they try to cover it up in South Korea because this is not the story you want to tell people about your country. Why would I, for instance, about your question, why are journalists in Africa not reporting about that? Why should they report it? Is this what you want? You said something about we only report the bad things. The way you portray yourself to people, that's how people are going to see you. And I thank God for this international forum for us to come and speak. This is also a forum like this for you to portray your country to the world at large, how your country is. Because whatever you say about your country here is a perception people who are not from your country will get about your country. So every government needs to have a directive of where they want to follow using their media. And I'm going to round up now. And when they invest majorly in their media, trust me, imagine your government is investing and the journalists are having enough money. They will make reports. They'll go to places that they don't want to go to make reports. All right, thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot for your opinion. So we got the question from the chat. I can't see it. Can you read?
There are no questions, just like some statements.
And I think it will be back to also share some of their comments. Just one or two, then we close it. Yes. For example, from her, originally Wolf, she said, I want to observe that most newspapers in Nigeria and by extension in Africa have online platforms and people read them. Based on this, therefore, it may be wrong to state that most people in Nigeria do not read newspaper. Another person said, very true, the use of radio as a medium of communication as well as using the indigenous local languages are very important and key in communicating with Africans. At least this goes with some of our partners here to work more on that. And also, now someone said, suggests that it is allegedly assumed due to the rise of new media, that it's an assumption because of that. In some cases, let's me use Nigeria as a case study. The government determine what journalists could report. Indirectly, there is no freedom of speech, even though there is in openly, but the action in way they are being, like someone was talking about how the politicians own the media houses, how some business. So we all know that media are not free. It's for something, power, money, or the one that is going on these days now. What is it? Just to be popular. So those are the three key areas, the reason we have it. So it's up to you. So now you're here and you're talking about solution. It's high time to know that we have a new field called solution journalism. Solution journalism. Solution journalism, SDGs falls on that type of solution journalism. For those of you who have been talking about it. So like we said earlier, you can still form that, communicate with us. It's possible to work with you, but it has to start with you. So I think finally here, Journalists Union Guide of Editors, retired journalists can establish media for alternative. They can also work on legislation to regulate the better space. That's it.
And we had just one more active online participant. Yusuf, if you want, you can have the floor. Well, ah.
They want to talk, right? The person wants to talk. Okay, is there anyone online who would like to contribute? If you want to, you can mention your name or ask them to, they'll give you an access. You just have to unmute yourself. If you're online and you can hear us, I know they can, some of them just comment. Yes. You can hear us, just let us know that you want to contribute, then we'll give them your name. Okay, Dr. Adamu, if you're still there, are you there? Just say yes in the chat. Or Mubarak Oladusu. Okay, Dr. Adamu is there. Please, can we, Alina, please help. They will give you access now, then you unmute yourself, then you can contribute.
Thank you so much for the debate and for the discussion. There were a lot of problems that were revealed, ideas and solutions announced. Thank you for sharing your ideas with us. And it was a great pleasure and honor to welcome you here today. Thank you so much for your participation in the forum, for your participation in the role-playing game and in the section that was covering journalism and SDGs.
Thank you very much, Katya. And I would like just make some final notes. We are finishing our official program. Now we are moving to the more pleasure things. We will give you the certificates of participants right now, and then we will have a lunch where we can discuss everything. I just would like to say that during these 2 days, we were hearing you, or we were thinking about our possible ideas and our possible solutions that we can make together. And our team has prepared a kind of a joint communique on all the topics that were discussed yesterday and today. And we'll share this document with you. And we are asking you if you are agree with those things which are pointed there, to sign it and to use it in your work, in your countries, and to share it with your colleagues. Because it was a great job that were done by our colleagues, our media specialists, who prepared everything together and put it together. Thank you very much.
Okay, Dr. Adamu, you can make your contribution because we are closing, but we know you've joined us since yesterday. Thank you very much.
Oh.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, okay. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. I just want to observe that regarding the issue of not having a Pan-Africanist media, I believe to some extent we have. And I know that group that presented equally talked about the media in Africa and especially in Nigeria, try to report and portray the positive aspects of Nigeria over Africa. To a very large extent, that is Pan-Africanism. You wouldn't expect us to be portraying our negative things. So I want to believe that with that, we can build on maybe having more exchange of content with other African countries so that it will be like a kind of promoting each other. That's just what I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Так, кто будет говорить?
Я боюсь. Раз, все, нормально. Тихонько. Не, нормально, нормально. Okay. Could you please sit
Hello, everyone.
down?
Hello, hello.
Dear guys.
Please let's settle down and be quiet so we can get the certificates one after the other, please.
We will have a lot of time to communicate with each other in the coming time, in the coming minutes. Just final notes. We would like to give the certificates of all the participants who make a really great contribution to this event. And we do believe, again, that that will be just the beginning of our mutual cooperation and of your cooperation with each other. And the certificates will be given for you by the advisor of the rector, Mrs. Zhukova. I would like to invite Rania Abulker. Boasso Kouassi will be the next. Then Tanya Rusike. Sorry. Это фото для Тани. Сейчас она идет. The next is Diane Ellen. Fabian Formuch. Okay. Babatunde Odebayu will be the next. Then Brandon. Mohammed Siddiq. Maxim Zobo.
Ginger Ndebele. Nurhan Ahmed Mustafa. Timur Shehepo. Francis Lungu. Francis. Najma Paul. Ian Scovia. Last but not the least, Scovia. Diane, we would like to give you the certificate.
No, no. Others who are here that they will get their certificates. They need to know.
What?
Other participants. To know, just to know that they will get it.
Exactly. And a very brief note, all the participants who came from Moscow to Rudy University or who came from other Russian cities or who participate online, we will issue digital certificates for you too, sure. So everybody will receive their certificates. Thank you very much. Let's make a group photo. Спасибо большое.
Please let's be hurry. Group picture, please. Group picture. Let's come up here, please. Okay, guys. Hello. We're going to do something. And let's pay attention to it. Just listen to my voice. So let's go. Yeah. Okay. We don't talk about guys, you have this one, right? The video. Short video. All right. One. The first thing we're going to do is to say thank you in Russian language. Spasiba. So let's go. So 1, 2, go. Spasiba. Can we do it again? 1, 2, go. Spasiba. Okay. Now next one. Africa. 1, 2, go. Africa. And next, Russia. 1, 2, go. Russia. Now, anything you want.
Да, вот один зритель. Нет,
Да, я давно говорю, давайте.
Молодой человек, который камеру, нам ее надо убрать. Да. А выключен наш фотоаппарат, вот как вы так хорошо сделали, светильку запрыгнули, можете еще раз сказать один раз? Ну, с нашим Madam Director.